Talk radio will actually educate, inspire, and make you think. The future is now. Topics and music that affect your life from Universal Broadcasting Network. Tune in at ubnradio.com.
Hey, and greetings and salutations, everyone. Welcome to Dr. Judy, WTF, here on the UBN Radio Network. WTF stands for What the Freud. Please don't get ahead of us. My name's Walt Lusk. I'm your host, as usual, and we, of course, have Dr. Judy Rosenberg in studio. We are going to be continuing our three-part series of the damsel in distress, Maria, a patient that called in last week. And Judy actually breezed through the first 3 panels of the 9-panel mind map system, and we're going to pick it up again today. But before we do that, well, actually today's isn't a call-in show. We have a call-in. But I wanted to read a little bit from Judy's future book regarding panel 4, which is entitled "The Precipice, the Edge of the Abyss."
That's actually, Walt, that's right before panel 4, but it's heading right into panel 4, so.
Oh, is it? This
yeah,
is chapter
that's
4.
Fine. No, that's,
that'll work?
Yeah,
I think it works.
It's good.
Okay.
Please do.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
a work in progress, but it's a great book, so stay tuned. Everybody loves it. They say it's always darkest before the dawn. As you've discovered from before, not all bonds are sustainable. Negative bonds inhibit our growth, destroy our sense of well-being, and need to be dismantled. Dismantling familiar structures, even misery-causing ones that have seemed to carry us this far in life, will inevitably meet up with defiance from within. I call this the resistance, the precipice. We are creatures of habit, and that's a fact, and we do not like change, even if it renovation promises inspiration, renewal, and happiness. We usually arrive at the precipice not only our own accord, but when unsustainable bonds of our lives shatter and we hit our darkest hour. In other words, it's decision time, and she gives an example of, a wife who's been beaten by her husband, and she's called the police, and now the wife has to make a decision. Does she really want to follow through with it? Because she's going to lose her husband, lose her support, lose everything else. Kind of like the precipice. Sometimes we come to the precipice many times in our lives. Often they are first quiet, knocks at the door, or subtle little wake-up calls that attempt to gently shake us from our slumber. But if we keep ignoring these cautionary signs, they will inevitably repeat themselves over and over again in different guises and will grow louder and louder and louder. Inevitably, if we keep pushing the snooze button and ignore them, they will kick the door in on us. And by the time we might be staring at the face of a real crisis or perhaps even death, it is even then that we will have to be pushed over the edge and will be forced to respond reactively to our critical circumstances. I implore you, do not wait for catastrophe before you act. Make a preemptive strike. We've talked before in the show about being proactive versus reactive.
Right. On that note, proactive versus reactive. So all of us have choice points in life, and when we find that we're in situations that are truly not sustainable, are truly toxic to the fiber of our being, like the core belief that we talked about last time, and for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, I'm going to recap what we talked about last time so you could be up to speed. And so what we are faced with is always let life do it to us and bring us down and bring us to our humbling knees, or we can dismantle the things that don't work and take a proactive approach and preempt the catastrophe and the defense mechanisms and the blowouts. And so
yeah, but being proactive and doing that is a whole lot easier said than done.
Of course. It takes a courage, because it takes the ability to decision make and make huge lifestyle changes, even though we have talked about how even little changes can course correct us. As a matter of fact, if we do a 10% change over time, it extrapolates out to a pretty big change.
Absolutely.
So please don't sit there thinking, I have to make a 180-degree turnabout. No, not at all. Just make a small course correction. So, what we've been talking about in general via the mind map is really a matrix of information that I use. It's a visual system that I've been using for many years to heal human disconnect. And last week we had a very, very special guest, Maria, on, and I really appreciate her volunteering to go through the mind map process and allow me to demonstrate how the process works, because whether it's her particulars or your particulars or any particulars, the mind map works because the system is a system designed to really uncover the lies that really block our flow, and then the reactions to the lies that really make us go in wrong directions and overreact to situations and have reactions to situations that basically do not soothe us.
I was going to say the lies are lies that we believe to be true, right?
Yes,
We've been
yes.
ingrained in them from our childhood, and as Judy likes to say, childhood is a hostage situation. So, we learned at a young age that it might be true, but obviously later in life we learned that whatever that lie is, it's a lie.
Yeah, and in Maria's case, I'm just looking at my notes from last week, and one of the things she talked about was being absent from her mother for 1 month at age 4, and being in a country where her parents were surrounded by World War II, and the mother was left with deep feelings of unsafety, and also the relationship between mother and father wasn't all that wonderful, so she really didn't have a safety nest to really come from. And so her core belief, her injury, the mother-infant disconnect, landed as a core belief of I'm not important enough.
I'm not important enough.
Right. So to trace it from the stage of the wound, which is the disconnect, and the disconnect between her mother and herself for 1 month, and then the emotional disconnect because her mother was in a state of shock from the war. And then the reactions to this, which are still carrying it within her, and we're working it through in the core belief, which was something that she ingested, digested, and manifested. And this core belief is I call it kind of like a psychological virus or a psychological cancer that infiltrates into the fiber of our being and takes us down. And this core belief of I'm not important enough are kind of like the glasses through which Maria views life. And when she's viewing life through these lenses, then, well, of course, it's not going to look very good, and she'll be activated and reactivated in all kinds of ways. And we're going to find out today how she's going to notice and speak to how her core belief has affected her and thrown her into chaos, and the defense mechanism she uses to defend against this chaos. And ultimately, we're going to find out a little bit more about whether she's an imploder or an exploder, or whether she's going to unload here with me and express, and find out a little bit more about the journey from through to. So today, our journey is about through the process. So we've been
last week was from
the darkness of the wound, the reaction and the encoding, and now we're going through the process, and literally in order to make sure that the psychological virus or the core belief does not run the show, we have to dismantle it, and we're going about it proactively. So we're going to find out how it reactively started dismantling her, but now we're going to go about taking the system down, because it never worked, it doesn't work, and if she carries it forward, it's going to cause more chaos, and it's going to necessitate more defense mechanisms in her life, and ultimately that's going to be breakdown number 2.
Now, would you mind elaborating and give some examples of implosion versus explosion? I know when we did this, we talked about the case of the Rogers. I'm drawing a blank on his first name.
Elliot
Rogers, who was a student in Santa Barbara. He did not attend UC Santa Barbara, but he went to a community college there, and he felt a little more entitled and wanted to make himself known and seen with some ladies. And ultimately, he not only exploded in getting a gun out and killing folks, but ultimately he killed himself and he imploded. So that's unfortunate example of both.
Right. So on one end of the spectrum, we have people like Elliot Rodger, who carries around all of this pain and the wound of his past, and then this wound starts getting gangrene and growing and having all kinds of reactions and encodings, and it goes rampant within him, and then finally he can't stand it anymore, and his defenses break, and then at that point the whole showdown comes to head, and he can't take it anymore. So he expresses it by exploding and projecting his pain all over beautiful young people, namely, I think they were blonde, beautiful women that he resented terribly because they weren't having sex with him.
They weren't giving me any attention.
Right, and so you can begin to see that the core belief in his case was something like, I'm not important, I'm not lovable, I'm not wanted. There's something defective about me. And he acted out this core belief by a heinous act of exploding and projecting onto others and shooting them down, murdering them, cold-blooded murder. And really that doesn't help. That doesn't get rid of the feelings. So then he turned it against himself, and he imploded, and that was the end game. And now we're seeing it on a macro level.
Yeah, we are. I mean, it was
right?
9 different scenes in an hour where he went and caused so much chaos.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, traumatized a whole city and university, a school.
Absolutely. So hopefully we'll hear back from Maria and continue our analysis. And in the meantime, let's talk a little bit about chaos and the precipice and how that happens, because I do a lot of work with people who come to me when they're in panel 4, 5, 6. Okay, I don't get too many people who come to me when they're in panel 7, 8, 9.
Yeah, 7, 8, 9
is where we're heading
after the fact.
Okay, so that doesn't happen very often. And what I'm seeing in treatment is people come to me when they're really in crisis, and they're either headed for divorce, or some of them are headed to jail. I've had a few people in my practice who unfortunately ended up incarcerated. And so that's an example of how the core belief ran the show so well, pun and like sarcastically put here, that the core belief literally ran the person into the ground. And
wow.
As a result of that system that the person had could no longer live. So that system then went into a state of well, let's talk about entropy from a point of view of physics, okay? Because that's what's happening. If we're looking at it as a kind of like a universal truth, when we try to organize something, and the organizational aspects of that thing is not built on solid foundation, or even if it is, then what happens over time is we become disorganized.
As much as we try to be organized.
Right, and then we fall into a state of entropy, and this state of entropy causes us to basically not hold it together. Okay, so it's very difficult for people who have built their life around an unsustainable system to hold it together, because we're then using building blocks that don't work to try to structure our lives, and it doesn't work.
When you say building blocks, you mean kind of like a house of cards?
The house of cards falls.
Yeah, or
right.
Building a house on sand, right?
Right.
It's going to sink.
Right, and unfortunately, no, I do not have Maria's number. I'm hoping that she will call in. Why don't you say the number?
Well, the call-in number is area code 323-843-2826. So if you want to call in, or Maria, I can't remember the number. It's area code 323-843-2826. In the meantime, you can call in, and if you have some form of a aha or precipice issue, you can get on the couch with Dr. Judy, and we would love to talk to you and hear from you and get your perspective and our perspective on it.
So I'm thinking that if we don't hear from Maria, what I'm going to do is illustrate from another case study from my practice how this whole system works, because ultimately this is a system. So whether it's Maria's issues, it would really be interesting to hear from you, Maria. I hope that you are listening.
Yeah, I hope you're okay.
And repeat the phone number.
Area code 323
Yes.
843 2826.
Right. Okay. So So with that said, what happens to us when we put on a lens that we look through that is a core belief that's based on a lie? So the example I gave this example in my office about a child who, let's say the child's core belief is, I am stupid. Okay, so let's go to panel number 4. Okay, and
those of you that are listening to this on podcast, you can pull it on Stitcher or iTunes, and you can go to www.drjudywtf.com, and it'll link to the 9-panel mind map that Judy's developed. So we're going to go to panel 4.
Well, you know what? Actually, I want to step back a panel and go to panel 3, and let's stand in panel 3 and look at it from the perspective of whatever core belief you hold. So a core belief can be something like, I'm not important, I'm stupid, I'm ugly, nobody wants me, I'm damaged,
I'm not worthy,
I'm not worthy,
I'm not important enough. Yeah.
Right. And
you usually conduct your whole life around this core belief. You know, I mean, for example, Maria was talking about she's not important enough. You know, people just ran over her and she let them because she didn't think she was that important.
Yeah, so what happens is when we have this core belief, and I'm going to use an example that I brought up in my practice of a little boy who has a core belief that he's stupid. And so if you can imagine that he's wearing this lens through which he sees the world as, I'm stupid. Everybody's looking at me like I'm stupid, and
everybody's smarter than me.
Right, and I'm seeing everyone is looking at me like I'm stupid.
I think we have a call.
Oh, wonderful. Hi.
Good evening.
Hi.
Hey, Maria. Glad to join us. Good to hear from you.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm a little late today.
That's
well,
quite
we're just
all right.
so glad you're here.
Better late than never, so it's quite all right.
Really,
yes,
really
exactly.
appreciate it.
Were you starting to wonder?
Yeah, I wasn't sure. You know, our emotions are very delicate, as you know, so we always want to make sure that you feel safe and protected, and of course you have your anonymity, so really appreciate you being here. So just tell us a little bit. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, I didn't realize it. I'm just looking at the clock on my computer. I didn't realize it was quite as late as it was. My watch and my computer have different times on it, so sorry about that. I hate it
when it happens. No problem. We wanted to just ask you, from our time last week, were there any ahas or comments or queries or questions you had that came to you from our time last week before we dive in this week?
Actually, I feel a kind of surge of energy, and it's kind of interesting. Let me think if I had an aha.
You sound a little bit more energetic.
I had a lot of epiphanies. Yes, I did.
Okay. Love to hear what's been running through your mind and the epiphanies that you've been having.
Well, a lot had to do with how that the core belief for me has been that I have been taking care of myself emotionally my whole life. So why shouldn't I have already healed this? Why shouldn't I have already gotten through this?
Okay.
And the awareness of how, it's gone in waves, and I am a high-functioning being. I am a high-functioning person, but the sustainability hasn't been there because the minute something, it's not the minute. It's just that there's a tremendous amount of grief that I feel around this.
Okay. Okay.
And and I guess the grief is kind of the loss of my childhood, the loss of that innocence. I don't really know how to put it into words because it seems like it's.
I want
Well,
to ask
you're still formulating it, so it's okay.
I was just curious, Maria, because when we delve into it, it's definitely not a pretty process. It's not an easy process. And when we're going back to mother-infant disconnect and we're basically looking at it quite bluntly and so exposed and you know, here I am shining the truth light at the disconnects in your life, and then we all hold fantasies that we have had these wonderful childhoods and perfect little boxed memories and so on, and then of course we also carry with us the pain of that which hasn't been exposed. So we both know why we're in this and doing this is to release you from psychological prison, so to speak, but there's a price tag. And I'm just wondering if now that we're exposing it, there's this kind of a sense of loss of a childhood that you wished you'd had. Does that reflect some of what you're feeling?
My father is very frail and is, you know, pretty much. He
Did you say your father's very frail? Is what you said?
Yeah, my dad has Parkinson's disease and
Okay.
has had for the last number of years and has been living in Germany. And I just, you know.
You there? Are you there? I think we're having a bit of a difficulty hearing you.
More people are tuning in, and it's a broadband issue. You just have to.
Oh, really?
Is
that
it?
it?
Okay.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep
so
trying.
I'm not only. The irony is, I guess what I'm experiencing a lot of grief around, and I haven't been as aware of it as I am right now in saying this to you, that it's not only the loss of child I had, it's the loss of time.
The loss of
time.
The loss of time.
Because both of my friends, they're both pretty frail. They're both going through
their parents
a major transformation.
Sure.
My mother lost her husband of 47 years this last year, so I dealt with his death. I dealt with that loss. My stepfather, you know, but then at the same time, my father, and I've always been very close to my father. And my sister and I both have had a lot of loss. My sister's much younger, and she, we were laughing when I saw her last that we both shower our father with all this affection and love, and he was a real asshole to both of our mothers. He was not a nice husband.
Well, at least he was consistent.
But he was someone that both of us could connect with, because her mother, like my mother, was a victim. She was a consummate victim. And so we both had to endure that and the pain of that and the disconnect of that. And our father, even though he's disconnected, seemed more accessible. It was easier.
And that's a huge point that I make over and over again. We talk about the double dungeon, which is where mommy dearest fails and then daddy dearest fails. But sometimes our dads, no matter whether they're perfect or imperfect, and probably a combination of the two, they're there as in some form of a heroic way and offer us a hope of the outside world. But I do want to address the issue of grieving time, because I know that you're a spiritual person, yes? And
very much so. That's the thing that's kept me alive.
Yes,
really.
Yes. And we will get to this next time, because this is a psycho-spiritual model in the sense that when people, places, and things fail us, ultimately we want to have a trump card, so to speak, And this trump card is really the sense of something outside ourselves. And for those of you who are atheists or agnostics, please do not run. I'll lose some people here. And so, if the higher power that you feel is universal truth or source or God, or call it the light, or call it what you will, or a kind of a universal intelligence, that when we are failed by the people and places and things around us, and certainly your parents were definitely failed by the people, places, and things around them. For God's sakes, they were in world, in an era of World War II. Yes. Okay. So that's huge. And so, one of the things about people who are spiritual and they're smart and they're psychologically aware, as you are, is that we think that we're supposed to be able to cure ourselves. Like we almost kick ourselves in the ass thinking, how come all these other people are getting better? I know I do that to myself sometimes. How come my patients are rapidly growing, and oh my God, I can't believe that I have this hole in the soul here, or I have this backtracking here, and I can't get over this, and guess what? I welcome myself to the human race, because
we also, what you've done and what we all do, is we compare our worst to somebody else's and everybody else's best.
Right.
And that comparison is always a lose-lose. No matter how much you want to stack it, we'll always lose in that one.
And there's also, in addition to that, that's very true. What both of you are saying is very accurate in my own experience. But the other part of that is also, I recognize today and that there's also holding myself. Like, I feel very deeply when I'm not congruent with myself.
Yes.
I feel very deeply when I'm out of my intent.
That is such a profound statement, and I want to bring a little bit more information to what you said, because when you feel aligned with the truth, correct? When you feel aligned with the light, so to speak, when you are in the flow of your soul and your psyche and health, we'll call it mind, body, soul, right? There's no incongruency there, is there?
No.
Okay, that's in line, and that's in flow.
Yep.
Okay, and
so it's loyalty. It's loyalty to my own soul, loyalty to my own voice.
Right.
But what happens with me is I negotiate.
Okay.
And I could have been a lawyer, and a very good one.
Okay.
Because I can make an argument for this side, and I can make an argument for that side. And in that is where I lose myself.
Okay, so let's make an argument. Let's make an argument together. Okay, I'll go with you on this. Let's make an argument against psychopathology, and let's make an argument that things that are not sustainable are based on a lie. Fair enough? Okay, because if something is based on the truth, that is universal. That will hold. I was just reading something about St. Augustine, and one of a philosopher who stated that God is universal truth. And I really love that statement, first of all, because it doesn't offend the atheists and the agnostics, and I like that part, and that we get a chance to really have a common ground with every single human being. So what actually are you conflicting with within yourself is that you're really literally battling the light and the darkness, the truth versus the stuff that doesn't really hold any integrity to it at all. So when we come down to it, okay, that what we're really doing when we're disassembling our core belief is we're disassembling the lie so that we can be in integrity with ourselves, so that we could.
For instance,
yes.
For instance, let me ask you this. Let me just check in and see if this is what you're speaking to.
Okay.
When I talk about being out of my own integrity, it's like when I raise my voice and I start screaming because I get so upset about something that someone else is doing.
Right.
Or I feel that there's an injustice that's taking place, and or I feel that somebody is being insensitive to me.
Okay.
There's an upset that takes place inside of me that goes so extreme. It's like something shoots into my brain, and there's a chemical effect.
All right.
And then I have to work backwards to be rational, to be able to be calm and speak to it. Now, I've grown a lot, and I'm not as volatile as I used to be when I was much younger, but at this point, it's still something that I can't always catch quickly enough, and something that does it unhinges me.
Okay, Maria.
And then I get really upset with myself.
Okay, so let's go back to this truth and integrity to yourself, right? That's where we started the discussion, yes? And yes. we talked about being aligned with yourself. This is a great example, because really what we're talking about is when somebody trips you up, what they're really tripping up is the belief that you have about yourself, which again is based on the lie. Okay, so there it is. Think about it as the psychological.
So my relationship to myself.
That's right. Exactly right. Because this is about.
And the role that I played as a child, or the role that I took on.
Correct. So look at it this way. First, if we're going to take it to the psycho-spiritual point, let's do it. First, we disconnect from source, okay, universal truth, God, whatever you want to call the intelligent force. Then we disconnect from mother. Then we disconnect from ourselves. And then we disconnect from the world. Or let's say we disconnect from our primary relationships, our husbands, wives.
Is this a chronology that you're talking about?
Yeah, it's like a domino effect. Okay, think of it as a domino effect. We disconnect on the level of spirit. We disconnect on the level of human, mother and infant disconnect, literally, because we're born out of the womb. So there's a disconnect. Belly button gets cut, and then there are wounds that disconnect us further. And then we have these reactions to the disconnect. And if we're lucky, then dad comes in and heroes us, or somebody comes in and mitigates the damages, or someone teaches us to self-soothe, and then we're very fortunate people. But if not, then it all lands in panel 3, okay? So this is where you're talking about panel 3. Somebody comes along and says something to Maria that vibrationally, psychologically, exactly matches, okay, law of attraction, what they're doing or saying exactly matches what you believe about yourself, and that's based on a lie, and that's where it's out of integrity to begin with. So now let's work backwards. So now you're reacting from something that you believe about yourself that was based on a lie. Get it? Okay, now the new person, whatever person comes in, activates this core belief, and then you fall apart like a cheap suit. And then you know that, wow, somebody activated my core belief. This is going to happen over and over again. I call it a what the Freud, a WTF. And why? Because until we heal that core belief about ourselves, until we go back to the original wound that hurt us and express it there, instead of becoming the tag I'm it person, and that I'm the one to blame, I'm the one to shame, I'm the guilty party, I'm not good enough, I. So in the system, we're really taking it off the I and saying, I am not the cause of part 1 of my life. So therefore, that person tripping me up is really tripping me up because I swallowed a lie. I swallowed a psychological virus, if you will. Okay, can you see that piece of it? Okay.
Good.
And then, I was thinking back to that early period in my life.
Yes.
And something pre-verbal that I didn't mention last time is also, in Europe, they have this crazy idea that a child should be potty trained by 6 months.
Wow.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, my goodness. Okay.
And
wow.
I used to laugh at this picture of myself where I look all constipated, and I was just about a year old.
Yeah.
And when I think of my daughter, there's no way that a child has the inner musculature developed at that point to contain holding on to its own urine or or feces, and that in fact I was potty trained at 6 months.
Oh my
So
Lord.
Okay.
that by itself is like, if you don't have the power and the function to control yourself,
Right.
to control things, then that means you're imperfect and you're not doing it right.
Okay,
you
so
know.
what's the message? Okay, so
Sense
you're
of perfectionism
yes.
got internalized.
Right, and this is where OCD comes in, right? That we have
And I
to.
was very OCD.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So now we can
Was
see
very
the
hyperactive.
origins. Okay, origins of the wound. So here we're supposed to control our bodies, and at 6 months, a year old, we cannot control that function, and then we internalize the message, which is, shame on you, Maria. You pooped on the floor. Shame on you. You missed. Shame on you. You pooped in your pants. Bad girl. Okay? So this message, which is then again ingested and digested by you, is the lie, right? Is it a truth or lie? Is it a truth that you should have, and shame on you
It's a
that you
lie.
didn't? It's an absolute lie, and you're a mother, so you can see that a 6-month-old baby or a year baby, it's ridiculous.
Well, what's
to
insane
think,
is
okay?
we go to the bathroom every day, and you've got issues and stress and all this to perform and do it perfectly every day. And so you get ingrained. I would get ingrained at whatever they're trying to convince you of, which is a lie, given this issue. Wow, that's pretty insane.
And Walt,
Well,
yeah.
the other part of it, which is more of a question than a statement so much, is that this idea when a child differentiates at 2 years of age and
Yes.
suddenly becomes aware that they're separate from the mother,
Yes.
that is where the child learns to build a container. And that container isn't there if there isn't a healthy boundary of who she is and who you are.
Exactly. You've been doing your research. You've been doing your psychological
doing
research,
your homework.
because absolutely, in order to have healthy independence, we have to have healthy dependence. We cannot become independent. I was just telling a client of mine today that a 2-year-old will walk away from mom and dad and will feel confident about walking away from in the act, as long as he or she can turn around and check back and make
see them.
sure
Yeah.
that she or he could see the parents, and will
Exactly.
absolutely freak out if mom and dad suddenly disappear out of view, and that will halt the development. So that's exactly correct. In order for us to separate and individuate, we have to have healthy merger, okay, healthy container, which is mom, the healthy womb service, so to speak, eye contact, skin contact, unconditional love, safe environment, a father that nurtures your mother, the nurturer, a father that will mitigate the damages if your mother doesn't take her nurturing stance, her role in your life. Okay, so what part of what I just said did you have?
None of it.
Okay, so
Well, that's not true. I think actually I had a lot of confusion because I think my mother did dote on me.
okay,
She dressed me up like a little doll.
Okay.
I looked perfect wherever I went.
Okay.
And, my little patent leather shoes and my little hat and
adorable,
coat and
Right.
all that.
right,
But I was never allowed to get dirty.
yeah,
I was never allowed to fall down. I was never allowed to play. I wasn't allowed to really be a child.
I was going to say, you never
I
were
was
allowed to
just
be a
a
kid,
doll.
for goodness sakes.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so how does this help you?
And in fact,
yes.
I would get screamed at if I fell down and broke my tights or, hurt myself. I would get screamed at like, what did I do?
Okay,
Wow.
so here the parents are setting up unrealistic expectations of having perfect little bowel movements at age 6 months in a year or to a year in a potty. Okay, perfect. These expectations that you shouldn't fall down and you should stay clean and have this idealistic, cute little dressed up image. And yet, when you do fall down, right? Not only are you punished for it, but you then punish yourself because you didn't meet your parents' ideal. Okay,
their
isn't that a nice system? So
Jeez.
that I would call that a double dungeon. Okay, you're
Absolutely.
screwed. No matter what you do, you're screwed.
Right.
and then the part of it that I like the best.
And to
Yeah.
explore the world, and to, I was a very curious child, and
Yes.
very aware, and very, very hyperactive.
Okay.
So I was
So
always moving because that energy had to go somewhere.
Yep.
I used to have an allergic reaction to being around my mother. I couldn't be with her for more than 24 hours. I just couldn't take it.
Wow.
And most of my life, that was my response to her physically. Physically, I would feel so much pain in my solar plexus. It was too much for me.
well, it's too much for any child to think that
Absolutely.
their existence is meant to please mother or please father. And it sure sounds to me like your existence was built around the function of pleasing your parents. And so can you imagine what you felt like? I mean, it makes sense that you had an allergy toward your mother because she was seeing you with critical, judgmental eyes. And I've really seen some very dark things in my practice as of late, where criticism kills when people are judged, blamed, and criticized, especially by their parents. They can't stand it. And many people, under the pressure of criticism, blame, and shame, will attempt to take their own life.
Well,
So,
I'll tell you something, and that's who I married. I married somebody who had a real issue with judgment. He was
okay.
terribly judged and persecuted, and never could do anything right, and was diminished in the
Okay.
eyes of his mother. And so, whenever he perceived me to share anything with him that I observed, he felt criticized. It was a double-edged sword.
Well, okay. So, just in the
And
interest of time, because I was just told
yeah,
that we have 3 minutes, what
yeah.
we
Oh,
do?
sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Obviously, I could talk about this all day long, and if
Yeah,
we
we all
can't
could.
cover it in 3 sessions, or are you willing to come back for a fourth session?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
It's a
'Cause
journey here. It's not a destination.
It's a journey.
Definitely.
So anyway, we are now in panel number 5 when, Maria, you have to defend against this wound. So what do you do to defend yourself? Now you've chosen a husband that repeats the wound. Your core belief is alive and well. It's now so ingested into the fiber of your being that your parents don't even have to be there because you have a parental introject, if you will, from a fancy object relations point of view. You've taken your parents in; they're sitting in your head, and they're there, and you're listening to them. Okay, so they don't even need to be there any longer. They're running the show. Okay, and then you marry somebody that replicates all of that, and then ultimately what we're heading into, and next time we will head right into,
Stay tuned.
is holding cause responsible. Because when we project onto ourselves the blame and the shame, what happens to us is we implode and we get more sick, more depressed, okay? When we project onto other people, we end up destroying them too by making them the victims of our ill feelings. And if they have lousy core beliefs, then there's this beautiful projection game going on. I project into you, and now you feel my feelings, and now you're going to feel bad because your feelings are hooked into.
And there's a
the
lot
core.
of emotional punishment that goes
Absolutely.
And
on
many
the
times.
subconscious level,
Yeah.
and frustration, because there was also a lot of love there.
And
That's
it
the
becomes
other
a-
piece.
Yeah, and it becomes a vicious cycle.
So
Right.
so if you can come back next week, same time, same place,
Well, maybe
and we
may,
can
maybe a little earlier.
maybe a little earlier.
A little earlier, definitely.
That,
yes.
that's
I'm
fine.
so
And then
sorry.
we're going to head into the main, I call it the main vein of the pain, which is the wound, and go into it and really start holding cause responsible. So for those of you listening, I'm not talking about blaming your parents or shaming your parents. I'm simply talking about getting the poison out. And we have choices. We can either hold the poison in and blame and shame ourselves. We can project it onto other people and blame and shame them. Or we can go ahead and clear the passage way from the infiltrated past and unblock the flow and have what I call truth dialogues about what's really bugging us. Okay, and it's not necessarily only the person that's causing the damage. So please come back. I think we're at that magical hour where Walt says the clock is the tyrant, but he says it so much better than I do.
I have a quick question for you,
Certainly.
and that is, do you have anything for me? Is there anything that you'd like me to do in the way of homework
Yes,
or reflection for myself that I can take with me?
Yep.
Great
What
question.
I want you to
Great
do
question.
is I want you to make a damage list, just like somebody bumped into your car and left you with a fender bender, and now your shoulder or your neck is out, and you've got to see a chiropractor. You get out of the car, you identify the person, he identifies himself, and then you take his insurance card and you say, hey, I'm sorry this happened, nothing personal, okay, but you're going to have to fix my car. You're going to have to pay for my medical bills, and on and on and on. And I also have feelings about what happened, even though you may not think that you were intentional in doing so. So what I want you to do is I want to put together 2 damage lists. A damage list that belongs to your mother, and a damage list that belongs to your father. Because what we're going to do is we're going to, instead of imploding and exploding, we're going to be expressing and taking out the poison. Okay, does that make sense to you from a systems point of view?
Absolutely.
Okay, and that's what's missing in many modalities of psychotherapy is they talk about it, but they never really take the poison out. So
Kind of like a little legal brief.
yeah,
Right.
that's the next chapter here, okay?
Well, I think the confusion comes in to, well, if you're talking about it, aren't you releasing it?
Yes, but we're going to put, yes, and so we're going to end on this note that we're going to release it very directionally, very pointedly. We're not going to sidestep it. We're not going to sugarcoat it. We're not going to do anything but shine the truth light on it, and we're going to have a couple of truth conversations next time. Okay, so get ready for some truth conversations. Make the damage list, and thank you very, very much for
thank you.
My pleasure.
Well, thanks for calling and being part of the show.
Okay.
Have a great week, Maria. Thanks for calling.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, that was Maria. You've been listening to Dr. Judy in action. And now it's time for our show where we shrink that tune. And we have picked the song entitled Under Pressure. That's actually performed by Queen and David Bowie. And it's an older one, but we thought it was very apropos. That was a great call.
It was a great call.
Yeah, I mean,
appreciate
she's amazing.
Maria.
Very
and,
articulate.
I hope that those of you listening were able to take what's going on in your life and plug in what we're talking about and sort of see what went on in your life through the system that I'm presenting.
Because remember, we really do not have any control over the first part of our life, but once we realize we've got some challenges as a result of that, then we can have a much better second half.
Yes.
And it's not really how we start that really matters anyway. It's how we finish.
Yes.
Right?
So we are not responsible for part 2, but we're absolutely responsible to heal ourselves so that we can have a better outcome.
Absolutely.
I mean, we're not responsible for part 1, sorry, but we are
Right.
the
responsible,
outcome, and we are the cause of the outcome of our lives.
That we are. So, Queen, Under Pressure. Pressure pushing down on me, pressing down on you. No man asks for. Under pressure that burns a building down, splits a family in 2, puts people on the streets.
Okay, so looking at it through the lens of the mind map, we're going to look at under pressure as internal pressure and external pressure. So in Maria's case, there was a lot of external pressure. Her mother put her in a, I guess I'll call it a nunnery, for lack of better term.
When she was really young.
When she was really little, and she was disconnected from her mother for a month. And so this external pressure, plus the pressure from the war, World War II, okay, and all of the financial pressures and all the pressures of the stress from her parents, okay, these were the external pressures, pushing down on me, okay?
It's the terror of knowing what this world is about, watching some good friends screaming, "Let me out." Tomorrow gets me higher, pressure on people,
Sorry.
pressure on streets, clipping around, kicking my brains around the floor. These are the days it never rains, but it pours. People on the streets, people on streets.
So here's the internal pressure screaming, let me out. So this is the double dungeon. There's pressure internally because if mother doesn't allow the, if she doesn't bring in the self-soothing aspects of caring for the child, there's no way that the terror is going to be soothed. And so there's a sense of, I'm not comfortable in my own skin. Please let me out of this. Pressure on people, pressure on the streets, meaning now we're going to project the feelings out there on other people on the streets.
Turned away from it all like a blind man. Sit on a fence, but it doesn't work. Keep up with the love, but it's so slashed and torn. Why? Love.
Well, the fence sitting doesn't work, right? The
No.
precipice, standing on the precipice won't get you there. And also turning away from it in defense isn't going to get you there. So it's going to keep coming up. But it's so slashed and torn. It's already so slashed and torn. So there's a sense of hopelessness of why? Why am I feeling this way? And that's what we're shining that truth light.
Insanity laughs under pressure we're cracking. Can't we give ourselves one more chance? Why can't we give love one more chance? Why can't we give love?
Well, we all know that the most healing force on the planet is unconditional love.
Unconditional love.
And
It
so
certainly is.
when our sanity is at stake, what do we really need is we want to have another chance of connection, of healing. We want to give love, which to me signifies the healing of the disconnect and connecting again one more chance. And we're desperately looking for pathways of healing.
That's absolutely correct. And lastly, 'cause love, such an old-fashioned word, and love dares you to care for the people on the edge of the night, and love dares you to change our way of caring about ourselves. This is our last dance. This is our last dance. This is ourselves under pressure.
Well, this is also the point at which we have that choice point, right? This is our last dance. This is our last.
Could be our last chance,
Our last
too.
chance. Our
Yeah.
last dance.
Yeah.
And love is an old-fashioned word. If that represents mother-infant connect, then love is old-fashioned. We've always had mother-infants for forever.
Well, yes, we have.
Okay, and daring us.
Motherhood's the oldest profession.
Yes, it is. And we dare you to care, and we dare you to change our way of caring about ourselves, meaning that I dare you to look at your core beliefs and to look at the lies behind the core beliefs and understand that the only way we can care about it ourselves is to have self-empathy, which means aligning ourselves with the universal truth.
So we shouldn't be too hard on ourselves?
Right, because that's where we ingested the message of being hard on ourselves. We're just continuing it like a broken, loopy, what the Freud record. And that's, now we're talking about self-damage, aren't we?
Yeah, we are.
So this is our last dance, and this is ourselves. And under pressure, we can implode, right, or explode.
That's right.
Or sometimes under pressure, and under the right pressure, the right psychotherapeutic pressure, right, we can actually shift and morph.
Well, and release the pressure
And
ultimately.
release.
Yeah.
Right.
And as we say on the show, don't explode or implode, but unload. So you've been listening to Dr. Judy WTF. We are located at drjudywtf.com. I'm your host, Walt Lusk. You've been listening to Dr. Judy Rosenberg in action. And next week we will continue our series of the damsel in distress, Maria. So stay tuned. I hope you're enjoying this as much as I am. This is fascinating. And we're going to dive into the 6th panel of the 9-panel mind map and beyond. And if you have any queries, questions, comments, or requests for a song to be shrunk, you can write us at info, at drjudywtf.com. So until next time, keep the pressure light.
And again, Maria, thank you.
Thanks a lot,
very
Maria.
much
God bless
for
everyone.
participating. God bless.